Welcome to the Health Angle Podcast with Dr. Mike Headley and Dr. Gordon Fimwright, where we'll be exploring different angles of health to achieve the best version of yourself. Now here's your hosts, Dr. Mike and Dr. Gordon.
Welcome. I am Dr. Mike Headley, and with me is Dr. Gordon Fimwright. Welcome, Gordon.
Hi, and welcome to the Health Angle. And this week we're going to talk about heart disease and, more importantly, heart health, things that you can do to optimize your health. The Health Angle here, we to pick a different subject each week, each episode, with the goal to inform our viewers of things that they can do to be proactive to optimize their health and their health potential as well as their wellness. So, Dr. Mike, I was just looking at some of the stats. Heart disease, we already know this is the number one killer in America. One of the studies I read by the American Heart Association says that 6 out of 10 adults may suffer from heart disease over the next 30 years. That's 60% of the adult population will suffer from heart disease. That's not a good trajectory, not at all. Right now, according to the CDC, someone dies of heart disease every 33 seconds in the U.S. And then right now, we're seeing more school-age kids getting myocarditis more than ever. Why is that? How is that possible? There used to be like 9 cases out of 100,000. Now it's ballooned up to 150 plus cases per 100,000. That's a 16-fold increase. And why is that? So hopefully we'll discuss a little bit more about what are the trends, what's going on, how is this possible? Experts say that this country, we need to figure out some reverse trends, reversing things like obesity and diabetes. Otherwise, this heart disease will just continue and continue, and not only kill our fellow Americans, but also bankrupt our healthcare system. So not a good trajectory here, Mike, as far as heart disease goes.
No, it isn't. 80%, you said 60% of people are going to be affected with heart issues. 80% of people on their death certificate are going to have one of 4 things: heart issues, like you said, cancer, dementia, which includes Alzheimer's, and then diabetes and diabetes-related things. So we're going to be talking about all of those in future podcasts as well, because if you can avoid those 4, you have a pretty good chance of having a good, long quality of life.
Yeah, no doubt. What I'd like to do, Mike, is just real quick, start out with just a real quick anatomy lesson so people understand what is this organ called the heart. And I like to simplify it. If you just imagine a box, and you take the box and you draw a vertical line and a horizontal line, so there's 4 chambers. Basically, that's the heart. The heart is obviously not box. It almost looks like a bean that's kind of like a slanted and horizontal. It's kind of like a bean shape. But in those 4 chambers are, on the right side the lower part is called the right ventricle, and then the upper part is called the right atrium. And the purpose of this part of the heart is to pump the deoxygenated blood to the lungs. We want the lungs. We want to breathe. We want to bring oxygen to the heart. So the left ventricle and the left atrium, that brings oxygenated blood to the rest of the body through the aorta. So that brings nutrients as well as blood to the rest of your body. Everything in our body needs blood. We need oxygen. We need nutrients. And that's why the heart is so critically important. Then when you're talking about valves, when you're actually talking about the valve component, these are the valves. These are between the departments. So on the left side and the right side, from the atrium to the, from the ventricle to the atrium, there's a valve. It's a one-way valve. So the only way that we can get that to go one direction is these valves have to shut, so there's not a reversal of that blood vessels and the blood, I should say. So basically, the lub-dub, the sound from the heart beating, that's basically the valves opening and then closing, so it doesn't reverse back, so the one-way valve. We should have only about 60, 100 beats per minute. So that's our heart beating. Now, some of these world-class athletes, they got low heartbeats, so their heart works very efficient. Someone who's obese, where their body just has to work harder and harder and harder, their beats are much higher than 100 in many cases. And then the myocardium, the heart as a organ, is basically a muscle. The heart is a muscle. and it's called the myocardium. And since it's a muscle, it has its own artery. Again, the artery brings oxygen and nutrients to the heart itself, and the veins bring the deoxygenated blood away from the heart itself. And so if there's any kind of occlusion or limited of the blood to the artery to the heart itself, that's a heart attack. That's a heart attack. And of course, we've heard of stents put in to open up the lumen so there's not, devastating effects to the heart. We've heard of bypass, whether it's triple, quadruple. We've heard of people getting different type of innovative meds, all with the goal of helping this process out. So our blood pressure, it's just a monitoring tool. We should have a blood pressure of 120/80. And the 120 is the systolic. That's how strong the muscle is. And then the 80 is the diastolic. And that's when it starts to relax. And we need a good blood pressure. And of course, we'll talk about what can have a factor on the heart, i.e. also the blood pressure. And then, of course, the electrical signals. We've all heard people getting these pacemakers. They set the pace of the heart. It's electrical signals in the heart. It's really put on by the autonomic nervous system. It's called the cardiac induction system, and it propagates those nerves to allow us to have a good cadence. And we know that there's an electrical signal because our brain controls all electrical signals, and they go down through the spine. And of course, they go to the heart, and they can measure the electrical signals by a process called electrocardiogram, EKG. The E stands for electrical. Much like the electromyogram can check the electrical signals to the muscles, but you also have these EEGs, which is an electroencephalogram, EEG. The E stands for electrical, again, checking the electrical signals. So it's critically important that those signals are getting to the heart properly. And of course, the first sign of most heart disease is the heart attack, and many times death. And 1 out of every 5 Americans in the U.S. have heart attacks. So it's pretty prominent.
People ask me about systolic. Why is that higher than the diastolic? 140/80. It should be below that. 130, 120/70 is pretty good blood pressure. I always relate it to the pressure in our arteries when the heart beats is our systolic, because it needs to beat hard and push blood out. And then the diastolic, the lower number, is less because it's the pressure in our arteries when our heart's filling up, ready to pump blood out again. And it's critical to, they test it every time you go to the doctor and get blood work or a physical. I give blood every couple months. They check my blood pressure. They don't want to take my blood if it's too high. And that means my body's under stress. My blood's probably not healthy when my heart's not healthy. And it's just a critical number to know is your blood pressure bare minimum. And very good information, Gordy. One thing as a chiropractor, the reason why I check people's posture, and I don't have the best spine and the best health, but I take pride in making sure I can stand up straight. And if I can put my back up against the wall, my buttocks hits the wall, my shoulder blades and my head, I don't have forward head posture, is because the nerves in the lower part of the neck and the upper part of the neck have rich innervations to the heart. And when I'm slouching and I'm hunched over, that's compressing my heart and my lungs and my organs. And if you ever want to search, I use Brave browser, by the way, but if you want to search what your organs look like with poor posture and how they're jammed in that chest cavity, and that puts more stress physically on the heart, so then it's going to have a hard time beating. That's a huge reason why I talk to patients about posture, and I work on their spine and nervous system, because it is the number one killer. I want to keep their spine and nervous system and their posture proper, so it does help their heart indirectly.
Yeah. And the other thing too, Mike, when someone does have forward head posturing, a simple test that people can do is if they push their heads way forward, take a deep breath in through their nose, they'll notice that's a little more difficult to breathe. If you bring your head back where it's supposed to be and you take that deep breath in through the nose, you'll notice how much easier it is. And they show that breathing and apnea and all these other problems can contribute to health problems. I want to go real through some typical problems with the heart, and then we can get into dive into more details as far as what people can do proactively to prevent and make their heart the healthiest as they can. So congestive heart failure. Well, first of all, let me start out with congenital. This is stuff that people are usually born with, and you hear about kids with a heart defect, such as ventricle septal defect, which is the most common for kids to have. It's basically a hole between the heart ventricles, between the left and the right. So, and then of course they have medical interventions for that. So that's not quite what we're going to be talking about as far as prevention. That's just something that someone's born with. And of course, over time, you have congestive heart failure. And this is when that left ventricle pumps the oxygenated blood and the nutrients out to the rest of the body. Well, over time, depending on what kind of stress you put on your body, that can start to wear and tear. And over time, it just gets overworked. It could be due to age, heredity factors, or a valve not working properly. So congestive heart failure, that's another condition. And then you got one of the most common things that the heart can have problems with as far as disease is the coronary artery disease, CAD. This affects 1 out of 20 adults. It's very common. I look at it as rust being in the middle of a pipe or fatty material buildup in the vessels. And if it occludes, that's basically a heart attack. And then you have atrial fibrillation, which is just really, really increasing. We hear this, it's becoming more and more frequent. It's irregular heartbeats. And this affects 1 to 1.5% of the population. It gives you a 5 times greater chance for a stroke. AFib can really come and go. So sometimes people have problems with it, others they won't. So basically it's an irregular beat. It might be pumped higher, where you get more beats per minute, or it might just slow down as well. Things that can contribute to the heart disease, Mike. Let's dive into this.
Yeah, a half a dozen really robust studies. They are the topics include which exercises are best for lowering blood pressure. I think that's important. I have a study that says these supplements boost your heart health, so I want to get into that. And then also eating ultra-processed foods may boost your risk of heart attacks and stroke by up to 21%. Also, a study finds evidence of tumors in the heart from cell phone radiation, and we've talked about a lot of these things already. Do heart attack symptoms vary between men and women? We can talk about that. And then lastly, you mentioned about the myocarditis, and here's a headline that we'll talk about if we have time. Heart attacks in people under age 50 were on the rise before COVID, but not in athletes until the vaccines of COVID were rolled out. So we can talk about that at the end if we have time. So ultra-processed food can increase your risk of heart attack and stroke, Gordy, by up to 21%. A review of 20 major studies involved more than 1.1 million subjects over an average of about 12 years. It's a pretty extensive study. It revealed that more ultra-processed or junk food someone eats, the greater their risk for heart attack, stroke, and other serious heart-related events. And I know you're famous for your smoothie putting whole foods in there, frozen vegetables and fruit and protein powder and things like that. But ultra-processed, wow, that's damaging on the heart. I didn't realize it was that harsh. And whether measured by percentage of total calories or a number of meals, investigators found that each 10% increase in ultra-processed food consumption was associated with nearly 2% increase in cardiovascular event risk. So the ding-dongs and the ho-hos and the Little Debbies, the cheap granola bars, cheap protein bars, all the crackers and the cookies and the Oreos and the donuts, that's ultra-processed food. That's really damaging to your heart. And then 3 supplements boost your heart health. An analysis of 884 randomized controlled trials. That's a lot of trials, including 27 micronutrients and 883,000 participants, demonstrated that 3 things: folic acid, it's a B vitamin, coenzyme Q10, and omega-3 fatty acids, which I know you're a big fan of, could reduce heart disease mortality, heart attack, and coronary disease events. And I thought that's a lot of people, 883,000
Wow.
over, 27 micronutrients they tested, 884 randomized controlled trials. That's some pretty good research. So omega-3s, I know you're a big fan of it. I take it every day. I took mine tonight. So here's what I thought was kind of interesting, Gordy, is do heart attack symptoms vary between men and women? Heart attack symptoms may vary between men and women. Both women and men reported chest pain and chest tightness or pressure as the most common symptom upon arrival at a hospital. Women are more likely to experience atypical heart attack symptoms from men, including nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and fear of death. Compared to men, women experience more prodromal symptoms in the days and weeks leading up to the heart attack, including unusual fatigue, sleep disturbances, anxiety, and shortness of breath. Heart attacks in women are more likely to be misdiagnosed, possibly because women tend to display more varied, unique symptoms, and physicians may be less likely to suspect a heart attack in women. And so you don't think of that a lot because you hear a lot of guys having heart attacks in AFib and the chest opening up and rotor-rootering and the bypasses and all stents put in there. But women have to pay attention these days too.
That's great information, Mike. I want to go over some things that with our viewers, and I'm going to make a real quick, simple list. I want to go through it. And I think some of the viewers, maybe perhaps with a heart condition, may see some things on this list that they might resonate with. Well, maybe I need to take a different stance on what I'm doing and what my lifestyle is. So I'm going to go through these, and some of them are simple and some of them might be overlooked. But for example, sleep disturbances and apnea, that contributes to AFib, and it brings it up by 18%. So in other words, if you have sleep disturbances and apnea, your chances of having atrial fibrillation increases by 18%. Now, dehydration, this makes your heart work harder to pump blood through your body. So what makes your body dehydrated? Not drinking enough water, that's one thing. Drinking too much alcohol, that's another one. And then perhaps drinking too many liquids that are obscuring your body's ability to just hydrate your body. Basically, you're not drinking healthy fluids. Now, stress, this affects the heart in many ways, including the hormones can speed up or slow down, which is a direct correlation to your heart, whether it beats faster or slower. So stress, they call it the silent killer for many reasons, and this is one of them. Caffeine, sports drinks, and other stimulants, just like it says, it stimulates your body. Now, this might vary from person to person, but what it does do, these drinks do release norepinephrine, epinephrine, as well as noradrenaline. And these are hormones. And these increases the heart rate and the blood pressure, and it can cause the heart to irregularly beat. And then, of course, intense workouts. If you're working out too hard, too much, too fast, not good. They always say moderate exercise is the best protocol to be healthy. And of course, intense workouts cause your heart to work at a much higher level. And if that's sustained over a lifetime, that can be detrimental as well. And then there's other things like diabetes. Like if you have too much sugar in your bloodstream, that's what diabetes is, that damages the blood vessels and the nerves that control the heart. And then 2 out of 3 Americans right now, Mike, you walk by 3 people, 2 of them are either going to be overweight or obese.
Wow.
And that contributes to an accelerated atherosclerosis, basically clogging of the arteries that we talked about a little bit earlier. They also have a greater amount of blood that they have to push through your system. And that can lead to higher blood pressure and higher beats per minute. It's just your body is pumping harder. So 2 out of 3 Americans are overweight or obese. So that's a big thing. And then you just mentioned this, Mike, the unhealthy diet contributes to high inflammation in the body. And this loses the protection and contributes to heart and circulatory types of conditions. Physical inactivity. You build up fatty material, cholesterol, and calcium and inflammation basically in your body, and it contributes to obstructing and blocking the arteries as well, leading to the clogged artery or atherosclerosis. And then excess alcohol use. Wow, it raises blood pressure, first of all. It dehydrates you as well as increases your weight, and it increases the risks of diabetes as well. And this can cause the heart to beat faster. It can cause tachycardia. In other words, if you're over 100 beats per minute, that's tachycardia, not good for your heart. Smoking. People don't realize this, but smoking is like pouring toxins right directly into your bloodstream, causing your arteries to harden and narrow. So basically, smoking damages the vessels of the heart, causing plaque and coronary heart disease. So other contributions are large. Now, most people don't think of this. It's really important. Large meals or bad digestion, where you're thinking, well, how does that affect the heart? It does. It affects digestion. It affects the heart. It affects the brain. There's a nerve called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve connects the gut to the brain to the heart. By eating too much of a meal or having bad digestive issues, that can trigger the vagus nerve, and that can lead to AFib or other heart disturbances. And I just got a personal story. So, Dr. Mike, I was really into working out, and I decided, I'm going to take this creatine monophosphate. It's a supplement that helps to basically enhance your muscles. We get some degree of creatine in meat products, et cetera. You'd have to eat a lot of meat to get that much creatine. So I was taking it as a supplement. So not only did that disrupt me and my personal digestive system, but it also affected my beats. I was getting tachycardia here and there, and my digestion was off. I came to the conclusion pretty quick that vagus nerve was being stimulated. I immediately got off the creatine. I haven't taken it since. Getting rid of the creatine, and for another reason, is just having good hydration in your body, which is essential. All those things that I just had mentioned, you can have a combination of a couple or more of those. So someone's drinking, they're taking sport drinks, they're doing an intense workout, they're not sleeping very well, they got stress, they got deadlines. I mean, that pretty much describes the average working person. So there's a lot of things that people can be proactive, and we'll get to those steps a little bit. But the reality is there's a lot of different things that can affect the heart and its function, causing a lot of disharmony in the body for a lot of people. And it's not just US either, it's worldwide.
It is. Very good information, Gordy. Thanks for that. And with most conditions, you have to avoid the toxins or the poisons or the things that's causing it, which you just laid out. And then you have to start doing the things that really enhance proper heart function or brain function or kidney function and things like that. It's a pretty simple formula, but Dr. Gordy just laid it right out, what to avoid. And if you have too many drinks every night, you really, really need to consider it for your heart. But your brain and your liver and things too, but it's damaging. I don't think of it that way. Oh, I'm just having a six pack when I'm watching TV at night. That's really damaging your heart. Well, I'm just having a few cigarettes to unwind after work. It's poisons right into your blood, like you said. So avoid the toxins and do what's right. All right. Here's something that I know it's near and dear to you because you're a big fan of protecting from cell phone radiation, as I am. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified cell phones as a group 2B possible carcinogen in 2011. Since then, evidence of harm has only grown stronger. Two major studies published in 2018 link cell phone radiation to DNA damage and cancer. Research by National Toxicology Program found clear evidence for heart tumors in male rats. So what you've mentioned this when you go to the gym. Some females put a cell phone over their heart. I've seen guys put it in their pocket or on your hip. I think anywhere on your person is not healthy, especially over your heart. Please, people, take your cell phone away from your heart. Put it somewhere else. And at least in animals and rats, it can cause a heart tumor. This was interesting. I want to have a little quick discussion on this, Dr. Gordy. Which exercises are best for lowering blood pressure?
Common wisdom would say aerobics, but I have a feeling you're going to say something like stretching or some type of Pilates or yoga.
Exercise is well known for its ability to normalize blood pressure, but all forms of exercise are not the same in this regard. It's kind of shocked me. A recent meta-analysis of 2,070 studies, again, I think that's a huge amount of studies to look at, found that isometric exercise was the most effective for lowering blood pressure.
Wow.
Because I
Right.
thought, geez, get on the treadmill, get on the elliptical, get the rowing machine, go for a walk, go for a swim. I think that's really, really good. But the number one slot in effectiveness rate of 98.3% was from isometric exercises. Okay, combined training with isometric and weight training and aerobic was 75% beneficial. Dynamic resistance training was 46%. Aerobic exercise only improved blood pressure by 40%. And then high intensity interval training was only 39% beneficial. So sometimes too much stress on an already stressed heart may not lower the blood pressure. So in a secondary meta-analysis of submodes, the wall squat was the most effective for reducing systolic blood pressure. That kind of blew me away a little bit.
Wow.
While running was the most effective for reducing diastolic blood pressure.
Wow.
And then diet-wise, potassium and magnesium are important for healthy blood pressure regulation. More often than not, it's not too much sodium or salt that's the problem, but it's a lack of potassium. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And so I think you have to do more than just wall squats to help your blood pressure, but you can do Pilates, like you said, and isometric exercises and easier stuff, but you got to get out and walk and do some aerobic exercises as well for reducing the diastolic blood pressure as well. So you've mentioned this when you exercise too, a really robust variety, just like a variety of our diet, variety of exercise is really, really helpful for the heart.
Yeah. And just going right back to reiterate, if you're going too much, too intense, it does release cortisone, which is a stress hormone, which also increases the heart rate and everything else. And doing that sustainedly over time, that becomes problematic. I have a list here, Mike. I'm going to go through real quick that people can do real active, and then I'll let you continue with your studies. But a diet low in saturated fat, excess sodium, too much sodium, like you said, maybe you need more potassium. Watch your sugar intake. A lot of people are getting sugar without even realizing. You're talking about like granola bars are supposed to be healthy. Hey, maybe you're taking way too much sugar from these hidden sources. You get it through a granola bar, then you have a coffee break. And meanwhile, every time you're just putting all this extra sugar into your system. Cut back on processed man-made foods. Look at the foods that were around 120 years ago. That was before processed foods, that is, and manufacturing foods really took off. Fluid intakes like too much caffeine and sports drinks, just talked about that. Stress levels play a pivotal role, just talked about that as well. Lack of sleep, talked about that as well. And sometimes people need a little bit of a wedge so they have more of a comfortable breathing position, and whether that wedge is bringing the pillow up. Of course, that leads to forward head posturing, but would be even better if they have a bed that actually comes up just a little bit if needed. And then we talked about the electromagnetic forces, avoiding those and getting a good nightly routine. And then if somebody has apnea, that needs to be addressed and solutions need to be found. Physical activities every day, moderate levels. I love that study that you just presented, Mike. Great stuff. You can also add a little bit of walking, slow jogging, and then swimming to that repertoire. It can really make a big difference. You get those muscles pumping and getting blood and nutrients to all the bodies and system. Then you can monitor to this too. There's good heart rate and blood pressure monitoring, really simple through these wristbands, smart watches, and patches. And I know you have the technology, Dr. Mike. You have shared those with us in the past, and perhaps you'll share them with us again. And then you mentioned at the beginning, chiropractic supporting the structure, which ultimately can affect the nervous system positively. And of course, there's well-known studies now. There's actually a guy right here in Chicago that used to refer his patients to a medical doctor. And the medical doctor started to see a trend of their blood pressure started to be reduced. So the medical doctor actually decided to do a scientific study, and he found, sure enough, that chiropractic reduced the blood pressure in these patients. And it was just a tremendous study that came out. It must have been about 10 years ago or thereof. So it can, chiropractic can really eliminate various heart issues, including chest pain, rapid heartbeats, and blood pressure too. And there's science to back those. Dr. Mike, I'm going to send it back to you. I know you got some more studies to go over. And I do want to go over two medical doctors that I follow, and I think you're aware of their work. It's Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. Peter McCullough. So I'll share some information from them as well.
Good. Yeah, there's a doctor who is a cardiologist, Jack Wolfson. He calls himself the paleocardiologist. He's a little biased because he's married to a chiropractor, but he requires all of his patients to seek a chiropractor and be under regular chiropractic care when he takes care of them. And as a paleocardiologist, he focuses on their diet and natural means, and he allows chiropractors or his wife to work on them chiropractically. And he just has incredible results keeping people off meds and surgeries and restoring their heart health, doing things natural. So if you're really interested, the paleocardiologist, Jack Wolfson, I've heard him speak before, and it's a great book that called The Paleocardiologist. All right, Gordy, before I'll let you talk about your doctors, I just want to read this headline. Heart attacks in people under age 50 were on the rise before COVID, but not in athletes until the vaccines rolled out. Data from more than 20 years ago show heart attacks in young adults, most with chronic health conditions, were on the rise. But over the past couple years, as COVID-19 vaccines were rolled out and mandated, there's been a rise in heart attacks among healthy, fit athletes. And people just like, oh, that's weird. You and I aren't 200 years old. We aren't even 100 years old, but we've followed sports our whole life. We've played sports. We played high school and college sports. We've watched football professionally on TV a lot. And I go to ESPN and I follow sports a lot. And never before the last 2 to 3 years have I ever heard of these athletes just tipping over. And there's a book called Cause Unknown, Dr. Gordy, that they said like 32 athletes in the world would collapse on a football field, soccer field, in an arena somewhere in the world a year. Wow. 32 a year. What's that? Less than 3 a month, right? 32 a year. Worldwide, 8 billion people. Since the rollout of COVID, and you can look at the statistics in the book called Cause Unknown, there hasn't been a month with 32 or less athletes collapsing. That doesn't mean they all die, but there hasn't been 1 month in the last 3 years without people collapsing. High schools are putting these defib things on the field because all these athletes are collapsing, and they're blaming and suing the schools because it's the school's fault. Well, no, it isn't. Houston, we have to talk about this. I'm not pointing blame at anyone or anything, but we need to talk about this because this has never happened before. And so, I mean, it's just these younger and younger people are having hypertension and myocarditis and collapsing, and 20% of myocarditis patients are dead in 5 years. Some have permanent heart damage, and it's something that we need to have a little discussion. I know we only have a few minutes left, but tell me about the doctors. McCullough, I followed him in the past as well. Tell me about the doctors, what you've learned from them.
Yeah. So Dr. Malone, he's a medical doctor. He actually invented the messenger RNA vaccine as the technology. So he's pretty world renowned. He's internationally recognized scientist, physician, and he has approximately 100 scientific publications and over 14,000 citations of his work. And his wife of 45 years is Dr. Jill Malone. She's a PhD. She's behind the scenes and she collaborates with most of his work. He gets asked a lot things that you can do to alleviate the damage due to the messenger RNA shot, and as well as the long COVID. So in other words, Dr. Malone, he was censored quite heavily, and he had some stuff that he wanted to share, and he couldn't do it because of the controversy. But with that question, how to alleviate the damage of messenger RNA shots as well as long COVID, what he says, what you need to do is take vitamin K. And I'm going to share his website. I'll put it either in the comments or you'll see it on screen here. And I'm not going to tell you how much. You can look it up for yourself. It's all backed by science and journals. So the first vitamin is vitamin K2-MK7. And on his website, he'll tell you exactly what you need to take and how much. It's all backed by science. So among other strong benefits, it's advantageous for cardiovascular health. And then there's magnesium glycinate. And he tells you again how much on his website that I'll put on the screen. Taking vitamin D in high levels, like a lot of people do, or being deficient in vitamin K2 can actually lower magnesium. So among other benefits, it's improved the epithelial function. The epithelia, that's what lines the blood vessels. And he's also found that this magnesium also decreases blood pressure. And then taurine, and again, he tells you how much on his website, it improves vascular tone and blood pressure, and it's essential for heart muscle function and heart rhythms. So he goes into a lot of stuff. One of the things he says is that for some reason, our government doesn't really put enough interest in conducting randomized clinical and dose studies for improving cardiovascular health. And I think he's seen an increase, and there's been association with what we're just talking about, the messenger RNA shot and increase of myocarditis and other cardiovascular events. He says there's just not enough studies, and they need to be based on peer reviews. And so that's Dr. Malone, and I'll put his information on the screen. And then there's Dr. Peter McCullough. He's an internist, a cardiologist, an epidemiologist, and he manages common infectious diseases as well as cardiovascular complications, both viral infections as well as injuries developed from the COVID-19 vaccination. So he's got more than 100 publications and over 685 citations in the National Library of Medicine. So he's well versed on a wide variety of subjects and related to infectious diseases and cardiac problems. So there's a study that it's called the clinical rationale for the SARS-CoV-2 based spike proteins. These are the proteins that are coming into the body due to the messenger RNA shots. And he's got a detoxification protocol, and I'll put that website right on the screen here so you can look that up. And he goes through 3 major supplements to help to detox. And one is nattokinase is the first supplement, and this is known to dissolve blood clots. And these are all natural supplements you can buy in supplement stores. And then there's bromelain, which reduces swelling and inflammation. And then there's cerumen, which is a strong anti-inflammatory supplement as well. Both of these, I'm going to just put the information. You can read through their information. It'll give you a whole lot more. But I think it's a serious thing to look at all areas of where possibly this increase in myocarditis as well as heart disease. I think it's important to look at all areas and exhaust it. So back to you, Mike.
Yeah, those doctors are really, really world renowned. Dr. Malone, you mentioned first. He has been labeled misinformation, anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist. He took the first 2 shots, first 2 COVID shots. He had such a bad reaction to the second one. He had to go to the emergency room because he had such a cardiac event. His blood pressure went through the roof. You can't be anti-vax when you took the vaxes. He was world renowned beforehand, contributor to the mRNA technology. And so then he says, wait a minute, I had this reaction. Is anyone else getting these reactions? And he dove in head first and found out really the truth about the shots and how they affect our heart, how they affect cancer, autoimmunity are just the 3 big topics for sure. Neurological issues is the 4th one. And so he is very, very credible because he helped the technology. He was world famous before this. He took the galldarn shots. Whether you like shots or not, he took them. And so he had such a bad reaction. So now he's warning people about the truth about them. And now he gets labeled anti-vaxxer misinformation. And Dr. McCullough, he's considered the #1 cardiologist, heart doctor on the planet. How do you get number one? Is the most peer-reviewed studies. World famous doctor, great credentials at many universities, teaches, presents papers, writes papers in his sleep. And he started, after a couple months into COVID, he says, hey, wait a minute, I am literally treating patients, and the protocols with the respirators and remdesivir and some of these other protocols aren't working. And so his team of doctors created protocols to help people. And now he's vilified and says anti-vaxxer, misinformation, conspiracy theorists, because he's telling the truth. And he has a robust hundreds of studies now on the COVID shots if you really, really want to learn. And my last bit of a rant is I recently heard Dr. Fauci belittle podcasters. Don't get your information from podcasters and Facebook memes and YouTube. Well, we never just present stuff out of the air. We present stuff that is backed by science and or references. And so why shouldn't people listen to us? I say, he never cites references in research and studies. He says, get your shot or this or whatever. And everybody knows the 6-foot distance thing and the school closures and stuff that was made up. That's never been done before, and closing economies and things like that he recommended. Mm-hmm. And so what we do, Gordy, is we're podcasters, but we're doctors as well, whether we talk to someone one-on-one or we do it on Zoom or YouTube or a podcast. We're just citing the evidence and the studies. So I don't have to remember what I say. I can just look at my notes and look at the studies. And it's not made up. And he never gives us studies like that. So I'll challenge you, listeners, to challenge his credibility, because he just cries foul a lot when people don't agree with him. We just present the evidence.
Yeah. There's a doctor that I follow that brings all the research to the forefront and shares just about every day some scientific study that's coming out. And there's more and more and more and more research, and it's phenomenal to see. If our viewers are interested in learning more about the COVID and the vaccine and more information, I think Robert Kennedy Jr.'s book called The Real Anthony Fauci would be a good place to start. Because when you read that book, I remember reading it on Kindle, and he shared with so much information that gave you such background and so pertinent information. And he backed by every single thing that he said was researched and scientifically journaled. And I remember after I finished the first chapter, it took me just as long to go through his research, because he had footnoted it. So I was like page after page after page after page just after the first chapter. And so that would be a good reference for someone who really wants to dive into it. There's some other good books out there, but I'd say that would be a good one to start with.
Great recommendation, Dr. Gordy. Thank you for sharing that. And, as we kind of close down, I like to end on, what is your number one takeaway from this podcast? Some of it was review, I know, with EMFs and diet and exercise and things like that. But Dr. Gordy gave you specific, vitamin and nutritional recommendations and things like that, and some great anatomy with the heart. What's your number one takeaway that you can share with a family member at dinner tonight? And just really ask them, how's their heart? How's their blood pressure? How have you had a heart checkup lately? Are you doing any heart healthy exercises? Then number 2 question is, what's your number one action steps that you can take away today? Right? What can you do to help your heart? What can you do to help your health? What's your number one takeaway? And what's your number one action step that you can start today? Write a plan. Look at the books Dr. Gordy recommends. There's some supplements in the websites he's going to post. So with that, Dr. Gordy, any closing thoughts, or what are we going to talk about on our next podcast?
So our next episode, Dr. Mike, we're going to cover foot health, and we're going to look at ways that we can optimize that part of the structure of the body, because that can really compensate and cause other problems up the spine, including knee and hip and back and neck. And of course, if you affect the structure, you can affect the nervous system. So foot health, that'll be exciting to explore, and we'll go over all types of different solutions and things that you can do to be proactive. So until then, we'll see you on our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on the Health Angle Podcast. Please subscribe to our channel and catch us for our next episode.